There is a problem with video game critique nowadays. I think most of us can agree on this as a fact. There is a discussion to be made who is at fault here, when did it all start, but I'm sure we can all agree that critique is, well, just...
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Yeah. And you know, it happens due to many reasons. Journals being bought by publishers, people review bombing games for stuff unrelated to the game itself, politics, things that someone said or thought or misunderstood, or actually things that we expect from games, and perhaps we shouldn't. And I am totally guilty of it myself. Like, you know, I left a bad review for Helldivers 2, cause did you know that you can't buy Sony games in Baltics anymore? And hence, I can't really buy battle passes for Helldivers, and well, despite the game being quite good, it ain't the best customer experience for me, personally. But let's slow down for a moment and really think about this. Why exactly do we even read or watch game critiques? Ideally, it should be to help us decide whether a game is worth our precious time and hard-earned money. Yet, increasingly, critiques seems less informative, and instead reviews are usually focused on things that objectively don't matter in a game. In general, review is supposed to stay as closely to facts and objective reasoning as possible. Why? Well, because otherwise it stops being a critique and increasingly becomes an opinion. And while opinions are valid, they're also by default not objective, and hence do not provide representation of the truth. But you know what is the issue? Thoughtful approach does not sell too well, like, at all. It is much easier to make a popular video reviewing a game if you say it's an absolute disaster, as many YouTube critics do. But in real life, nothing is so clear-cut. Almost all games are falling somewhere in the middle between being bad and being good, and should be discussed as so. But why exactly did we arrive here, and how critiques stray so far from its intended path? Well, it's complicated. There isn't just one villain in this story. Sure, media consolidation plays a role, reviewers are caught in a hype machine or under strict embargoes, and they can struggle to give a fully honest opinion without risking their access and careers. And let's face it, social media doesn't exactly reward patience or thoughtful discussion. But maybe, just maybe, part of the blame lies with us, too, the audience. Maybe we demand critiques that confirm our biases rather than challenge our perceptions. Perhaps we've become so entrenched in our own opinions, in these echo chambers we've crafted online, that real critique, honest, nuanced, and yes, sometimes uncomfortable critique, has become something we're not always ready or willing to embrace. And before you turn me off and put a dislike on this video, let me explain, okay? So, before we start flinging blame at Twitter mobs or corporate boardrooms, let's get our definitions straight. At its core, critique is structured analysis. It's not just saying I liked it or this was trash. It's about the why. It's about talking the thing apart, looking at its moving pieces, its intentions, how it hits, how it plays, and what kind of ripple it creates. A good critique doesn't just tell you what something is, it digs into how and why it came out this way. Let's say you've got a game with a janky combat but phenomenal story. A proper critique doesn't stop at combat sucks or story is amazing, it explores how those elements affect each other. Does the narrative suck you in enough that you're willing to push through the clunky gameplay? Or does the combat drag the pacing down so badly that it breaks immersion? Now, earlier I've said critique is supposed to be objective, and I'll be honest with you, I lied there a bit. Or at least it cannot be objective in scientific sense. Games are art, and art is messy. It's subjective. We all bring our own tastes, preferences and moods into the experience. But for critique to have any value at all, it should strive to be objective. It should be informed, it should be justified. You can absolutely say this part didn't work for me, but if you're actually critiquing, you have to explain why it didn't work, and whether that failure came from the poor execution, bad design, or just not vibing with your personal tastes. Take the eternal debate over Elden Ring and difficulty in From Software games. Are they too hard? Should they have an easy mode? And honestly, that entire argument is subjective. Some people just enjoy punishing difficulty, others don't. That's not a helpful ground for critique. What is useful is asking whether the difficulty is fair, whether it's intentional, and whether the players are actually experiencing what developers wanted them to experience. There's a big difference between dying because you refuse to engage with key mechanics, yes hardcore players, I see you skipping spirit summons and Shadow of the Earth Tree, and dying because sloppy hitboxes, poorly communicated systems or bugs. One is a skill issue, the other is design issue. And when we're talking about critique, this is where we start dipping into different lenses and frameworks critics use. Two of the most common ones, and in my opinion most useful ones, are the authorial intent and formalism. So, authorial intent is pretty straightforward. Instead of judging whether you liked something, you ask what was the developer trying to do, what emotion or reaction were they aiming to create, and did they actually succeed. Using Dark Souls as an example, From Software has gone on record saying the point of difficulty is to make you feel a real sense of achievement when you finally overcome a challenge. It's not just hard for the sake of it, it's made so you feel that victory high when you defeat this hard monster. And looking at the success of the Soulsborne genre, it's pretty safe to say that they nailed that feeling. Now, formalism is a bit more dry, and honestly, I think it's trickier to use well with games, especially artistic or experimental ones. But the idea is this. You break the game down into its individual components: gameplay, sound design, narrative beats, progression systems, and you look at how well those parts function, both on their own and together. Do the mechanics support the story? Do the visuals reinforce the tone? Or is it a bunch of disjointed stuff thrown together with the duct tape and day one patches? It's like checking if engine, the tires and GPS in the car are all working towards the same destination, or if they're fighting each other and making the right voice. And now that we established what critique is, let's see what is wrong with current state of affairs. You know, for me it's kind of wild how video game journalism has become one of those most disliked professions in gaming. For good reason, for sure. But still, if you think about it, journalists were supposed to be guys that corporations hate and public loves, not the other way around. There's been a pattern, a slow erosion of audience trust over the years. Whether it was reviews that felt more like marketing copy, or coverage that seemed more interesting in pushing ideological angles than evaluating the actual games, we saw the cracks. Integrity was lost, not once, not twice, but over and over again. And the worst part, they weren't even subtle about it. We've seen outlets publish glowing reviews for games tied to very companies funding their events, buying their ad space, or giving them exclusive access. Or they dunk on a game not because of its mechanics or performance, but because of something a developer tweeted, or the perceived politics of the fictional character. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Stellar Blade. Somewhere along the line, the critiques stopped being about the game and started being about everything around the game. And look, this isn't just about big media outlets either. Even YouTubers, streamers, content creators, we're all part of this now. If you're recommending or not recommending a game, you're stepping into the role of critic, and with that comes the kind of unspoken responsibility. You owe your audience an honest, well-thought assessment of whether this thing is worth their time, attention, and hard-earned cash. I, myself, owe all of you that. I owe you my best effort in giving you advice. But when it comes to video games, that system is not just broken, it's practically non-existent. The purpose of critique, at least in a consumer medium like gaming, is to help people make informed decisions, to explain what works, what doesn't, and why. We need to filter out the noise, the hype, the marketing fog, and just focus on the game itself. But instead, what we've ended up with is circus. A chaotic mess where reviews are more about vibes than substance. Where politics and outrage get more engagement than honest craftsmanship. And where the algorithm rewards rage, tribalism, and loyalty to the side more than it rewards insight or nuance. And if you're watching this and thinking, okay, but aren't you doing the same thing now? Hey, fair question. The difference is, I'm not pretending I'm above it. I'm in this mess too. I've caught myself reacting emotionally to dev statements, or rolling my eyes at the game just because it didn't align with my expectations. We all do it, but that's exactly why this conversation matters. I'll be honest with you, despite all the political outrage swirling around Avowed's art director, I was still hyped for the game. Like, genuinely excited. I waited for it, I kept my hopes up. I mean, I've loved pretty much everything Obsidian has made up to this point. So yeah, I was ready. And when it finally dropped, I played it. And you know what? It was okay, not terrible, not amazing, just okay. Not really worthy of the Obsidian's name, and if I'm being blunt, I didn't even feel compelled to finish it. But it wasn't a disaster. What actually frustrated me the most wasn't the game, it was the discourse around it. I saw hundreds of videos ripping into interactivity and immersion, like people pointing out that arrows disappear in the sky, or that guards don't react to threats unless it's a scripted event, or that cutlery and bottles don't have physics. Like, okay, I get it, but you know what? Despite a bunch of big YouTubers basically treating any disagreement like heresy, I just don't see how any of that really matters, at least not for the Obsidian game. Because here's the thing, the games they keep comparing it to, Skyrim, Oblivion, those are completely different beasts, different vision, different execution, different priorities. Apart from Fallout New Vegas, which literally ran on Oblivion's engine, Obsidian has never been about physical immersion or sandbox-style interactivity. That was never their focus. They've always been about something else. Stories, faction dynamics, clever writing, choice and consequence, real RPG systems, but what they never had was this kind of world interaction for its own sake. You didn't play Pillars of Eternity to pick up every fork off the table or watch NPCs dynamically react to dragon flying overhead. You played it for the deep lore, the political intrigue, the party banter that actually meant something, the kind of dialogue trees that could turn an enemy into ally or get some of your party mates on enemy's side. Their worlds were mostly static. They could change with faction and story choices, sure, but they never bothered with times of year, the objects in the game, and, in most cases, NPCs were just nailed down to one or maximum two places. And I mean, if you would say that doesn't matter, then why they didn't do the same mechanics as Oblivion, even though Oblivion is much older, like almost 20 years older? Well, I actually have 2 points to say against that. Before Oblivion there was another great game, Arx Fatalis, which was released another 4 years before it. In it, you could cook food by just putting it near the fire. Imagine the interactivity, so question is then, why Oblivion doesn't have it too? Does it make Oblivion a bad game cause it doesn't have cooking? Well, I don't think so, and perhaps you would agree with me. My second point is how adding this immersive mechanics makes the game better. In my opinion, every game is all about the core experience that it wants to deliver, and I don't see the immersion being core experience of Avowed. It certainly is for Skyrim and Oblivion, since those games are to live in rather than just to play through. So, what I mean to say is, returning to this authorial intent, any game needs to be judged on what it sets out to do, not on what some other game did 15 or 20 years ago. You can't just slap someone else's design philosophy onto different studio and say, why it doesn't feel like that. That's not a critique, that's just projection. Avowed isn't trying to be next-gen Oblivion, and I think that's where so much of the discourse just completely misses the mark. People went in expecting Bethesda's emergent systems and came out disappointed because they found out a more guided, story-focused RPG. And instead of asking whether that experience was successful on its own terms, they started tearing it down because it wasn't something it never promised to be in the first place. And I know, the story itself wasn't also good in Avowed, but that's a different story, and that would be a reasonable discussion. And this is the difference between critique and opinions. One is reasonable discussion, the other isn't. And that's the problem with a lot of critique today. It doesn't try to understand the game, it tries to categorize it. Is it like Skyrim? No? Well, then it's bad. Is it like Baldur's Gate 3? No? Then mid. We've become obsessed with comparisons, we don't let the games breathe in their own creative space anymore. We often judge them based on how well they mimic the giants that came before them. But that's not fair to the game, the devs, or the audience. Because at the end of the day, critique is supposed to help us engage with the work, not beat it over the head with a ruler for not checking off someone else's list. And I'm not saying you can't criticize a game for what it lacks. Of course you can. But that lack of something has to matter for the core experience of the game. It has to be meaningful in the context of what game is trying to be. If you are reviewing a tactical RPG and complaining that it doesn't have real-time combat, you're not helping anyone. You're just shouting your own preferences into the void. To this point, does Baldur's Gate 3 become a worse game because you only have turn-based fights, even though its Pathfinder cousin can switch between real-time and turn-based at will? Well, it doesn't seem so to me, and I'm sure for many of you it doesn't seem this way either. And this is where things start to get a little darker, because it's not just about misunderstanding games, it's about what internet and the algorithms that drives it rewards. See, the truth is, thoughtful, balanced critique doesn't really get you views. Nuance doesn't trend. Saying, Avowed is fine but a little underwhelming, well, who cares? It's not a sexy thumbnail or a title. Although who am I to say with my current thumbnail, right? But Avowed is disaster, boom, clicks, engagement, algorithm juice. Suddenly, you've got 200k views, 10k comments, and an army of people either cheering you or calling you a fraud. But why does it matter? You got your 5 minutes of fame, so you're happy with it either way. And the thing is, you don't even have to believe it, you just have to sound like you do. This is how critique turned into performance. It's no longer about expressing an opinion, it's about representing a position. You're not just saying, I didn't like this game, you're saying, I'm on this side of the fight. And once you're locked onto the side, well, you better stick to your script. Because if you waver, if you start appreciating something the other camp likes, the same audience that boosted you can just as quickly turn on you. The tribalism turns critique into combat. You're either defending the industry or calling out the shills. You're either woke defender or a toxic troll. There's barely any room left for people who just want to say, hey, this game is weird and complicated and I have mixed feelings about it. This is just not spicy enough. And again, let me be clear, I'm not immune to this. I've definitely caught myself framing things more harshly than I should have. Or sometimes I'll hold back a compliment for a game that should get one because I'm worried it will confuse the message. And that's what this environment does. It punishes honesty and rewards consistency to a brand. And you know, the cost of this, it's massive. Because once critique becomes about sides instead of analysis, we lose the point of the whole thing. We stop learning, we stop being curious, and we stop engaging with games as art, and we start using them as ammo. So, after all this ranting, where does that leave us? What's the solution? Well, there isn't a magic one, no button to press, no patch to fix this whole thing. But that doesn't mean we're helpless either. The truth is, a better culture or critique can exist, but only if we all do our part. That just means creators, journalists, devs, and yeah, the audience too. And first off, for critics, for content creators, for journalists, for everyone here on YouTube, including myself, we need to slow down. Seriously, just slow the hell down. You can't make a good take on a game on a launch day. You don't need to drop a review 5 minutes after the embargo lifts just to farm the algorithm. It's okay to live with the game for a while. It's okay not to know how you feel immediately. In fact, it's better that way. And when we talk about games, let's try to frame it around what the game is trying to do, not what we wish it was. Ask, did it succeed at what it wanted to be? Was that goal interesting, meaningful, fun, or at least worth talking about? That's where critique gets valuable, not just viral. Also, we need to stop pretending we're not part of the problem when we are. If you are making this kind of content, you're spitting fire for clicks, own it. Don't dress it up like you're doing high art. Either dig deep and be honest, or be an entertainer and stop pretending it's journalism. The audience can usually tell anyway. We can even see that nowadays YouTube values hour-long critiques that come a year or two after the game released, or even more. I myself don't feel ready to do such reviews, but I love creators that do, so I hope this platform will give you even more views over time. Now for us, the audience, we need to stop treating creators and critics like our personal avatars in the culture war. People are allowed to change their minds. They're allowed to like something you don't. Stop demanding that every opinion is a loyalty test. If someone says something nuanced, we need to find it in our hearts to listen, at least at times. If someone disagrees respectfully, we better off engaging than attacking. Of course, there are dishonest creators that need to be called out. Of course, there are things that are prepaid by corpos. But by creating outrage around this, you only drive more clicks to the content you hate so vehemently. In modern day and age, outrage and harsh comments and tweets don't matter. Ignoring matters. Put the content to never show me this again. And in the long run, it will be much better for you and for the platform that you're on anyway. And maybe, most importantly, if you value honest, thoughtful critique, then reward it. Click on the 40-minute breakdown instead of rage bait. Support the YouTuber who takes 2 weeks to make a fair review, not the one who yells meat in a thumbnail and drops 5 hot takes a day. The algorithm follows your clicks, so make those clicks count. And finally, for developers, if any would be watching, games are supposed to be about what you developers want to make it about. It doesn't have to be next Skyrim, it doesn't have to be next Dragon Age, even though it wouldn't be a good marketing nowadays. It needs to have your own great value, and you just need to make everyone know what value you bring. I know that this approach might not bring the most sales initially, but it also brings most fans long term. If you're honest with yourselves and the audience, this is how multi-million companies are built. The companies that are later able to release Baldur's Gate 3, for example. In the end, critique only works when we're honest, informed, and rooted in curiosity, not outrage. If we want better conversation about games, we have to start having them ourselves. No sides, no scripts, just the truth, as best as we can tell it. That's, to be honest, is what we all owe to each other. And that should be enough.